topic. Julie Goldenberg from Morgan Lewis, Sarita Venkat from Cisco, Shawnna Yashar from Lenovo, and Amalie Weber from Splunk. And I'm going to turn it over to Julie and the panelists to introduce themselves.
All right, well, thank you so much, Manita. I'm the least important person today, so I will introduce myself very quickly. But my name is Julie Goldenberg. I am a partner at Morgan Lewis out of the Philadelphia office. We're having a big week in Philadelphia, so please keep us in your thoughts as we get ready for the Super Bowl. But I do patent litigation and other IP litigation, and my practice is about 50% trial work and federal circuit work. But I'm here with three very esteemed women, so I'm going to let them introduce themselves because they have so much to offer on this topic. So I see Shawnna first on my screen. So Shawnna, can you introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks so much, Julie. So my name is Shawnna Yashar. I am a director of IP litigation for Lenovo. I see lots of friends in the group, so thank you guys all so much for coming today. I really appreciate it. It's good to see so many familiar names. Before I came over to Lenovo, I've been at Lenovo for about 8 or 9 months. I was head of IT and patent litigation and patent procurement at Mantech. And then before that, I was senior counsel at MicroStrategy. And before that, I was a partner at Baker Hostetler in Washington, D.C. So good to see you all. I'm really excited about this topic. This is something that I have been working on since the beginning of my career. So it's great to see so much interest in it and in how it's evolved over time, which is wonderful.
Great, thanks, Shawnna. Next on my screen is Sarita. So Sarita, can you introduce yourself?
Hey, good to see everybody. Thanks for joining. Thank you, ChIPs. Thank you for Morgan Lewis for putting this on. I love that there's such a big turnout. Always excited to talk about these topics. I head up litigation and competition at Cisco. I've been in this role for about 7 months. Before that, I was at Apple for about 10 years, having various roles. But the funnest part of my last decade is probably being involved in ChIPs and starting my volunteering work with ChIPs probably, 10 years ago, I would say, and building the next gen programming. And we build that out into a summit, and it's just so awesome to see everything flourish in the way that it did. And hopefully building out the community that our team has built for you is really resonating, and it's a great place for you to find mentorship and anything else that you need from this amazing community. I will turn it over back to Julie. I think that's enough of an intro from me.
I should have said you really need no introduction. I think we've all enjoyed hearing you speak at so many ChIPs events, and thank you for everything you've done for the organization. All right, our last but not the least panelist is Amalie. So can you introduce yourself, Amalie?
Sure. Thank you also to ChIPs and to Morgan Lewis for pulling this together. I have been working for the last, over a decade now in government contracting, but for tech companies. So I started this transition to government contracting law at NetApp, and then I was at Snowflake, and currently I'm at Splunk as the director for legal and contracting in our government and public sector space globally. But before that, I was an IP lawyer, so it is still clearly close to my heart. I've got all my best friends in IP law, and it's just a wonderful thing to be included in this community, and working in tech in the DC area is a lot of fun, even when you jump the fence and start going on the transactional side.
Great. Well, thanks, Amalie. We'll welcome you in the team, even if you've jumped the fence. So I'm going to ask the first question to Sarita because I know that she has a conflict and has to leave a little bit early today. So we're going to try to hit her hard in the beginning, get as much knowledge out of her as we can while we have her. So Sarita, how do you take diversity into account when you're hiring outside counsel?
Yeah, that's a really big question. And I think that it's something that at all 4 companies that I've worked for over the course of my career is something that I've really paid attention to as I've come into a role, because of all the work that we do outside of our day jobs, promoting diversity through ChIPs and other organizations. When I first got to Cisco, the first thing that we did was to embark on a 6-month exercise to understand who we're using and having specific conversations with all of our firms and putting out a survey to each one of our firms that goes deeper than sometimes like a legal operations team would do in understanding diversity across firms that you use and across vendors that you use across a legal organization. So what we did was we had a small team that looked across all of our major firms. We created a survey full of questions that we were interested in knowing about our firm. So how many cases have you worked on in the past 5-7 years? What was the team makeup of each of those cases? Who billed? What was the ranking of the billing partners or the associates? And what is the makeup of the diversity of those specific teams that worked on Cisco cases? So that's number one. The number two is, what does your department look like? What does your litigation department look like? What does your IP litigation department look like? What does your broader department, which you are a part of, that you're doing work for us, look like in terms of all of those metrics as well, especially the diverse teams and who makes up those departments, and really how many are partners, how many are equity partners, how many are associates, what is your pipeline? So there's a second set of questions around that. And then we also look at firm-wide. What does your diversity look like firm-wide? And it was a long process, and it really required someone to be super proactive and focused in finding the data to understand, is there a problem or is there a celebration to be had in the way that we've managed our cases and the way that we've managed diversity on our staffing with outside counsel? You know, the reason it's important to me is that I want Cisco to be represented in the way that we think about providing an inclusive future for all. If that's the mission of my company from a business perspective, I want to make sure that the people that are representing us in the public and making the arguments that we need to make are also inclusive and are actually coming in from a diverse perspective, just like we try to make sure our customers, vendors, partners, and all of our ecosystem is actually represented with a diverse workforce at Cisco, but also the way that we're representing our values to the world. And we actually just finished the results. And then what we do is to layer on, the second part of this is layer on, okay, what did the spend look like in dollar amounts? How much did we spend in each one of these firms? And let's layer that on top of the diversity results that we got from each firm. And let's see where our money is going and if it should be going in the places that it's going based on the results of the survey. And so we're doing that part next. And then the third phase will be, okay, are we investing in the right firms? Are we, why haven't we seen certain results from other firms? I'll tell you, our results were way better than I expected. We have such amazing, diverse case teams on our litigations almost across the board, with the exception of 1 or 2 firms. And to me, that was a great baseline to work from. And now we decide, okay, where do we need to actually have conversations with firms? Where are we seeing problems? And let's make sure we have an action plan to address that piece. And so it really was 3 phases for me, and it happens differently in different companies. You know, you have a legal operations team that keeps track of origination credit, for example. Places like Apple, they've been pretty public about, if we don't like to see origination credit come in, we don't do that here. And so we're going to get rid of it. Whichever partner we believe is the right partner for a case. And more, we take pitches only from diverse firms, right? If you have a diverse team come in, that's who's going to get the pitch. And if you're seeing those people in the room and those are the people that you're pitching to do my work, I'm not giving origination credit to somebody that came in 7 years ago and happens to be the person that has the relationship with the firm, because what we've found is that really holds partners down, especially disproportionately women and minorities. When you have that origination credit going to one partner, you have no way of really building the credibility, the reputation, the partnership track that you need to build and building out these clients. And as in-house, we're doing all of the work to make sure they're coming in for the pitch and the diverse team is coming in. But at the end of the day, they're not feeling the result of that in their practices and building out their client base. And so that's another great way I've found that really makes a difference for law firm partners. I think it's hard to police, and that's a whole other conversation. But those are the two ways that that I would say, you know, I've seen it work practically, as long as there's real proactive thought and focus on the issue.
Wow, thanks, Sarita. You touched on two really important subjects that I know are near and dear to both Shawnna and Amalie's hearts. So I'm gonna go in the reverse order of the last thing you just mentioned, which was origination credit. I know, Amalie, when you and I talked in preparing for this panel, you had some thoughts about that. Do you want to elaborate any more on how you think origination credit has sort of gotten in the way of helping diverse candidates and diverse attorneys succeed in their careers?
Yes, I mean, I think this is a really important issue that the firms have to come to grips with. It's a legacy system that firms operate under. And we see it consistently because there is somebody who forms a relationship with a company. And then as you expand your use of that firm, even if you're expanding it in areas that I'm interested in, I consistently work with partners who are not the relationship partner. And I go specifically to those attorneys for their expertise and for their client service. And they are my go-to. If I've got something, I'm emailing them. I'm not emailing the relationship partner. And my follow-up work is entirely based on the service that I am getting from those excellent partners. And they are diverse. They're women, they're men, they're whoever happens to have that expertise and happens to be really good at servicing our issues. And the thing that I have heard, you know, not very long ago, for completely different reasons, I happened to be on a vacation with a lot of partners from different law firms. A lot of them were men. And they were also complaining about this origination credit and about who the relationship partner is, because it holds everybody back. And I don't think this is an issue that is unique to women. I don't think it's unique to any particular group. The reality is that coming up and getting credit for what you've worked on is a challenge across the board. And it faces a lot of junior partners, I would say. And associates, because sometimes, frankly, you're reaching out to an associate and they should get credit for that. And the suggestion that I would say for firms to really consider, it's really hard to go up against years of practice and how the firms are organized and compensation schemes. What I would recommend is insist on the data. Insist on the data, because data shines a light. And we use that a lot within our own organizations of, well, before you can change anything, let's look at the data. Let's collect it. Let's look at it. And after that, we can think about what to do next. But if you're not even looking at the data, if you're not even collecting that, then therein becomes a problem. And just know that on the company side, we have a notion of who is the lead attorney on matters. And it is not necessarily the relationship partner. And we are putting those in our systems because we know who we're reaching out to. And I know that it's not necessarily the relationship partner.
That's great advice. So another thing that Sarita touched on that, Shawnna, I wanted to ask you a little bit about is I heard about sort of Cisco's outside counsel guidelines. And I understand that Lenovo also has some new outside counsel guidelines aimed at improving diversity and representation. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, what the intentions are and how they're working?
Yeah, so this is really exciting for me. And we have a whole new litigation team at Lenovo that started within the last year. And we came in, and one of the big things that we wanted to take on with the support of our general counsel was some new outside counsel guidelines. And in these guidelines, we do have a diversity requirement. They were always there. It was kind of their soft, but now it's a hard requirement. And they need to be reported twice a year to us, January 31st and July 31st. And if we don't see diverse representation, we are reserving the right to deduct 10% off of the fees. So this is, we are putting our money where our mouth is. We saw some good examples from others in the industry who have been doing this for a while. HP comes to mind. I know they've been doing this for a while, as have others. We're excited about this. We have gotten great responses from our firms. This isn't just how the firm is diverse, though. These are on our matters. We want to see diversity on our matters in particular. And we do plan to follow up on it. So this is new. We're going to see how this goes. There were lots of questions from a few firms, but most firms were happy to see it, which was great. So we're looking for ways to make it diverse. And as Amalie said, it's diverse along every aspect, right? This isn't just like one category of diversity. We're looking for a well-rounded team with well-rounded experience, and also giving junior associates significant roles on matters. What we don't want to see is just a particular person put onto a matter to meet a diversity target, and then that person not getting significant work. So we want to see out a breakdown of each associate, each attorney, what they are actually working on and what percentage on our matters. So it's going to be an interesting year for us to see as these come in.
That's great. Sarita, I know you talked about some things that have been successful for Cisco and your other companies. Have you seen any maybe well-intentioned diversity initiatives that haven't worked? And do you have any insight as to why?
You know, one of the challenges I think that we face, and I'm going to go outside of the specific outside counsel piece, but if you think about collecting data and collecting survey results, I see this challenge coming up in this space, but also when we talk about how do we increase women inventors in our patent system. I see the challenge being the collection of data that is meaningful, because people have a privacy issue with disclosing certain aspects of themselves or of their identity. And I think that has been a challenge that I've faced at a couple of different companies, where is the data actually accurate? And some of the, at least 2 or 3 firms have mentioned that they can't really stand behind a couple of the answers that they had to answer to our questions, because they just simply don't have the answers from their employees. And so I see that to be a challenge. And that's getting kind of into the weeds. But the other challenge that I see is honestly keeping your focus on it constantly. So firms only really respond if you are paying attention to it. It has to be consistent focus and consistent, keeping your eye on the ball as to who's showing up to the trial and who's leading this case. And then next year, are we doing the same survey? Because it falls off unless you're paying attention, and they don't really follow up on some of the action items that we've set out for them, unless you give them business, right? And 2, you're consistently asking those questions. So I think my challenge going forward is, okay, what does my 5-year plan look like to make sure these numbers stay the same? And are they going to fall off or not?
And Shawnna, I know that you have, I know you're looking forward to your new diversity initiatives with outside counsel, but do you have any outside of sort of the outside counsel world, any diversity success stories to share where you've seen sort of your actions make a real difference?
Well, yeah, actually, I mean, one of the things, I mentioned at the beginning of this is I was involved in these diversity conversations very early in my career. Some of the first panels that I ever went to 20 plus years ago were on these initiatives, and it was always a dream of mine to actually see these kind of requirements and forceful, like, we're going to count metrics, we're going to make sure that people are actually having diverse panels that you're seeing. And I'm actually seeing that. We have a number at Lenovo of first chair, women that are litigating our trials. That was something I just didn't see as I was coming up. So it's been really successful for me to see this, and I'm really excited about how it's going to keep moving forward. I did want to tag on, though, if I could tag on to something Sarita said, because it's a really good point that she made, which was when you're looking at the numbers and you're like paying attention to it, one thing that I'm seeing a little bit that we have to keep watching for is some of the most diverse attorneys get tapped a lot for the same work and for the same client and doing the same work. And then I find that they're just too busy, and I'm not getting their best work from them, even though I know they're perfectly capable, because they're getting put on too many matters. So it's been an interesting partnership that I've had with a couple of our firms to make sure that we are not tapping the same people all the time, and that we're looking for diversity outside of the core group that you've worked on. Because one of the diverse things that I would like to see is not just the same diverse panel that I'm used to seeing, which is great, but I want to see how they're fostering up and coming people and how they're recruiting younger associates to help satisfy those roles and giving them substantive roles and substantive mentoring. So this is going to be an interesting thing for us to do, but I like Sarita's comment about keeping on top of things, and that's certainly going to be a challenge.
Oh, and that was a perfect transition into another topic that we have today, which is mentorship. So I'm going to open this up to anyone that wants to answer it. But what role does mentorship play in career advancement for diverse IP attorneys?
It's huge. And I'll go because I have got like 5 more minutes. So I hope I'm not taking over your time. But I think how many studies have there been about mentorship playing a key role in professional advancement for women and minorities? I mean, I think that's just a fact at this point. And I'll tell you a story about how I'll show up to a ChIPs Global Summit. I'll see all of my amazing friends and people that are doing awesome job in their practices and all of that. And then I'll go back to my work. And I noticed recently that I was working with a law firm, and I had just seen 2 of the partners from that law firm at the ChIPs Summit, and we were talking about how, all how great the program is, blah, 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 and their careers. And I realized I don't see them. I don't see those female partners in my cases and my matters, and they're in that exact space. And so I thought that was just so wrong. I'm on the board of ChIPs, and I'm having these conversations, but they seemed removed from my real life and the firms that I'm working with, and the amount of work that these women that I get to do with these women is non-existent in my actual professional career. And so I called them up and I took them to lunch, and I said, listen, I don't know where you all are. I don't know what the politics are of this firm. But I have a case with your firm, and I telling you, I don't really not that impressed with this team. So you all need to step it up in whatever way you need to maneuver within the firm. And if it helps you to say that you had that conversation with me, go for it. I don't care what they think of me at the end of the day and what my feedback is, and the result was super positive. It ended up becoming a more working relationship. They got a bit more origination credit on some other matters that I think that they would be great at, and all of those things. And their feedback to me was, I wish you had talked to us sooner. Right? Because when you're in a firm, there's so many different things that are going on politically within practice groups or with your partners or whatever. It takes a client to actually have that conversation. So it catapults them into the position they want to get to develop those relationships a bit more. And mentorship for me has been huge. Noreen Kroll was my first boss at Apple, and she created ChIPs, and I basically wrote her coattails. I mean, till today, and having her as an example that I can talk to all the time. And my current CLO is Dev Stelkov, who used to be the GC of Microsoft, and she's hugely involved in LCLD, and is a huge supporter of ChIPs, and she has a huge leadership team that is incredibly diverse, the most diverse in any place that I've worked at. And I watch her and how she manages people issues or legal issues and how she mentors me. And it makes all the difference in the world for me to feel confident in myself and feel like I can just show up as me. And it's just going to be reflected in the way that she manages people, in the inclusive way that she does. And so I think it's probably 50% of my success is all of the people that have mentored me along my career.
Thanks, Shawnna. Amalie, any other thoughts on how mentorship is important, particularly for diverse IP attorneys?
I think it's absolutely critical. I mean, it's the hardest thing to hear. And I remember being in a lot of these types of panels and talking about your future of your career, and somebody says, oh, mentorship is so important. And it's one of those tricky things, because until you have a good mentor relationship, you don't really know what one looks like or how to go about getting one. And the reality is that it is somebody taking a specific interest in you and helping to talk to you about how to modify what you're doing and making sure that you're hitting the right marks and making the right moves politically, internally, and understanding how the ropes work. And if somebody's not willing to show you the ropes, it's really hard to figure them out on your own. But I stress that mentorship is diverse itself. If you're narrowing your view on who can possibly be your mentor because they have to look like you and think like you, I think you're being a little bit too narrow. My mentors, a lot of them were male. A lot of them were not exactly looking like me. And it doesn't preclude somebody from taking an interest in you just because you're not identical to them. So I think that is something that we have to bear in mind when we are mentors. And this is one of those pay it forward moments. When you get good mentorship, you need to also give good mentorship, and make sure that you're finding the next folks to teach them the ropes and teach them how to move, how to address this very complex world that we live in. But it's absolutely critical.
And Shawnna, do you have any thoughts on how we can all become more effective mentors for sort of the next generation coming up?
A couple of points on that. So, looking for a mentor for some of you that are looking to seek one thing that I have found is the only people that it really isn't only to me. Sorry if it comes across too blunt, but if the person that you're asking to be your mentor is not very comfortable in their role, in their position, and feel very secure and stable in their position, they're not going to be a good mentor to you. So it's really important to find the people within your organization that are really established, have a lot of respect from the upper management chain, whether it's within the firm, whether it's at a company. Those are the people to seek out and ask for to be your mentor, and just start asking them questions. It doesn't hurt to ask them. And what I found is people in that role are happy to do it. They're happy to provide that feedback and help you in your career because they're comfortable where they are. The problem that I usually see is where you do force mentoring. That doesn't work, never works. Don't even try. Bless everybody who's ever tried it. It just doesn't work. And then also, there's a mistake that we often make in seeking out a mentor that's somebody who is just very successful and is having a good run and is doing well. Hi, Sarita. But that's not always the best person, right? So it's, as you're selecting your mentor and looking for that, look for the people that have been very established in their career professionally. They don't have to actually be at the company for very long, but just somebody who's very secure in what they're doing. Those are the best people to find. And then when somebody comes to you, welcome them with open arms. But I find that people who are good mentors and that are secure about that are happy to take on as much as people are willing to do. So
I saw a really interesting comment in the chat from Melissa, and it was, it's not really a question, but I'm going to turn it into a question, which is that she wrote, my mentors were white men who took an interest in me in my career development. Sadly, the women back then were not interested in helping the younger generation. And that just seemed to dovetail with your comment about feeling secure. Like maybe it's because those women weren't secure.
Right. They couldn't give that to you because they weren't secure. Right. Like, I don't really blame the women for this. Like, originally when I had the same issue and I thought, why are the women not helping other women? And it's because they weren't secure in their positions. Right. For whatever reason, the firms weren't making them feel secure. They were worried about their jobs, and that just made them just not the right person to ask. So, once you are in a position where you can help create some of that security, it's important that you do. And I think that is getting better. But those are the people that you need to look out for. And I found that they have been men, women across the board for me. My best mentor actually was a woman, but she was older in her career and just didn't care what anybody thought anymore. And so she was the best mentor for me to have.
How do you think that we can help junior diverse attorneys create deeper connections with in-house counsel so that they can sort of build their careers on their own and sort of make a name for themselves?
I would say just be really, really interested in what your client wants of you. And the types of, just for clarity, the types of engagement that I usually work on are specific discrete issues where I'm looking for expertise and advice, and I kind of dive in and dive out and need people to help think through various issues with me, usually novel issues, because there's a lot of change in the regulations and those types of things. And I absolutely, first of all, I have somebody that I go to. And one of the things that I absolutely love about her is she tells me when she has no idea what she's talking about and when I really need to speak to somebody else. And she will help connect me with somebody else who has more expertise in that area, because she always wants me to think of her as an expert and somebody who's going to be completely straight with me about when she knows something and when she doesn't know something. And that is highly, highly valued by me, because I can trust everything that she's going to say. If she's over her skis, she's going to tell me, and we'll bring in the right resource to do that. And I expect that from everybody that I work with, to be very candid with me about their limitations and to be very candid about when they are actually in their sweet spot and they know what they're doing and they've got that type of trust relationship with me. But then I'd also say being very responsive. I don't like to have fire drills, but when I do have a fire drill, it really is a fire drill and there's pressure on me as well. And when I see that receptivity and somebody's responding to my needs, whether I'm asking, can you put in the budget because we need to have our accruals by the end of the month, and otherwise we're going to lose our budget, or whatever it is that we're talking about, we have a lot of pressures. And when we have that connection, that client service piece is really critical.
So we talked a lot about, hiring diverse outside counsel, but Shawnna, I think you also mentioned that you've been very successful in sort of building out at Lenovo a diverse in-house team. Can you share a little bit about sort of why you think you were able to build out such a diverse team and sort of best practices for recruiting for positions in your company to get the best diverse talent?
Yeah, we actually have an incredibly diverse litigation team. It's pretty fun. Well, it's a small litigation team, so there's only 6 of us. But it's 5 women and 1 man, and so it's in different racial compositions as well. So it's a very diverse team, which has been a lot of fun to work with. I think what's been really helpful for us is we opened up with the pandemic to recruiting outside of the Raleigh-Durham area. So Lenovo's US headquarters is in Raleigh-Durham, and then we also purchased Motorola a few years ago from Google, and they're based in Chicago, but our litigation team is really everywhere. So I'm actually in the Washington, D.C. area. Penelope Dixon, who's head of our commercial practice, is in Denver. David Wiggins, who's also in the IP group, is in Austin. So I think that's been really helpful and successful for us, is really looking, to recruit people from broader places. I'm unfortunately seeing a little bit of that rescinding a bit, as the ability to have remote workforce is not taking a hold quite as much as it was. But I think that's something that companies should continue to look for. If you're not getting the talent pool that you want in your particular marketplace, diversity should be something that you still consider and is very important. And I think you need to broaden it and consider remote work in those types of circumstances. I do think exceptions need to be made for that, because otherwise we're just going to have the same groupthink that you're used to. And that really comes even from having a lot of people in the same geographic area. It's not just diversity in terms of, gender and race and, religious and all other aspects that you might have. It does have geographic preferences as well. So I think I hope that companies continue considering remote workforce. It's working really well for me, and it's worked well for Lenovo. So we are continuing with that plan.
Do either of you have concerns that the shift to remote work has actually sort of hurt our abilities to be mentors, to receive mentoring, to sort of promote these diverse attorneys? Are they more likely to get lost in the shuffle of being at home with their heads down, working quietly, as opposed to being recognized if they were in the office?
It's a constant thought process. We do a lot of client service to our internal clients, and trying to balance. Everybody's really keen on working remotely, and I think as lawyers, it's actually almost helpful. These days, most corporate environments have gone to officeless group spaces that are actually really hard to work in if you spend most of your time on the phone or actually trying to write without like that quiet space that you can actually control. So there's a lot of advantages to remote work and working at home, and you can get very comfortable never having to take your slippers off. But on the other hand, that human connection, we tend to forget how important that is. And actually, it's a constant source of worry about team building and how is the team coming together, and are we passing the ball in the dark well, and do we function as a team, and do we create that stickiness with the people that we have in the department, because we like long tenured people in our department for a variety of reasons. So yeah, constant thought process.
I saw a question coming from the chat. I thought was a pretty good one. We've been talking about mentoring up and mentoring down, but do you have any thoughts of sort of being the best peer mentor you can be for someone who's your equal, your coworker, your bestie? How do we become each other's cheerleaders?
Well, I mean, I think that's like just the same as you become each other's friends, right? So, I mean, you know, I love cheering on my friends' stories. I don't find it braggadocious at all. So use LinkedIn, use Facebook, use whatever media, send an email. I love seeing those success stories of my friends. And I think that just, you know, encouraging people to share those moments and to celebrate them is really important. One thing that I try to do, I have like a local little, you know, networking group that we have put together. And if anybody gets a promotion, anybody has anything, you know, a big trial win, whatever happened, we go out, we celebrate just within our networking group, right? Like it's not just within your own business. And I think that that's really important to celebrate those wins in life, even though maybe they're not, you know, something that you would put on a resume, right? But even if it's a big win for you, I think that's important. So don't be afraid to share your successes. I love hearing people's success stories.
I think LinkedIn provides a great platform for that. You know, share your friends' stories when they post they got an award, amplify that, amplify your friends' voices. So we just had another question come in. What is your experience with sponsorships in addition to mentoring? Do either of you have any experiences with sponsorships?
I'm not sure what, I guess not, because I'm not sure what it's meant by sponsorships. Maybe Shawnna, you have.
Like within like professional organizations?
I would think so. Something, it sounds like to me like it's something more formal.
Right. So one thing that I worked on at my last employer was a women in technology group. Mantech was a sponsor of WIT, and we sponsored young women that were coming up in technology, and presented at various, you know, events and sponsored booths and charity events and what have you, and also had several interns from that program. So I really like those. I like them a lot. Actually, it's really fun to meet the young, like high schoolers in particular, as well as college students that are just looking to how to get into the field, especially in technology, when there's still not a lot of women in technology in America. Interestingly, you know, I work for a Chinese company now, right? So I've worked with companies with large China's presence before, and you don't see that in China. My workforce that, you know, I've worked with in China and all the executive team, it's 50-50 in the tech field. So it's really interesting that this seems to be a problem in America, that we don't have the same, you know, 50-50 representation in tech as you see in some other areas. So I try to mention that to young women who are interested in studying STEM and tech, and tell them that it's not just for the boys. You know, I've got a son that's going into engineering, so he certainly likes it, but it's certainly for everybody. And also, I think it's really important to let other women know that being in tech doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a scientist or an engineer, right? Being in tech can also be in HR. It can also be in recruiting. It can be in accounting. If you work in a tech company, you're still a woman in tech. So I like to broaden that umbrella and include more than just the people that are doing the development, because tech is got a bigger umbrella than just the coders.
So I saw the comment on what a sponsor is, so thank you for that definition. So in that case, I would say, at least in-house, sponsorship is absolutely required. If you are going to get promoted, somebody is going to be putting you up for promotion, and they are going to be helping shepherd your career, because essentially your manager and others have to be in a position where they feel that you need to take the next step. And I don't know that we necessarily call it sponsorship, but in terms of introducing and making sure that somebody is seen and that they are going to be the person, because it's not a step ladder in-house. It's not an automatic promotion. It's not like you're automatically this year you're up for it. It's not like now you're ready. The roles have to come and you have to be being groomed for it. And so the person who is going to put you up for the promotion has to be sponsoring you. They have to be making the case for why you get into the next position. So that is absolutely critical.
That's interesting. We don't have sponsorships.
Yeah, we don't call it sponsorships, but I'm just saying definitionally.
When there's a new position that's open, like that we're, for recruiting or anything within the legal team, at least at Lenovo, it's open to anybody to apply for, right? And Lenovo will give any Lenovo person who applies for a job in the legal team an interview for that position. So that is, you automatically get one if you want to move within the department. So actually the role that I have is the director of IP litigation, and the person who was in that role before me is now general counsel of one of our divisions. So he just applied. He, didn't have all of those type of, check boxes. This is a big new role for him. But, our general counsel is very excited to give people new opportunities and to spread their wings. So that is, that's really her driving it, is that her point is, I want to give everybody an opportunity to try something new if they ever want to. I don't always see that within in-house counsel roles. Yep. So she's a little bit of a unicorn with that. So
it's great. Shawnna, speaking of giving people new opportunities, I know that one thing that you commented to me when we were preparing for this talk was that you've really been looking for ways to give expert witnesses who are diverse new opportunities, who might not be aware of that. Can you comment a little bit about what you've seen in the expert witness field and, the changes you're trying to enact?
Yeah, I mean, we don't look for diversity just on our attorneys, right? I'm looking for diversity in terms of who's testifying at trial. And often our cases, in IP, there's not any fact witnesses. It's just expert witnesses that go up there. So, one thing that we're looking for is trying to find women, in particular in the tech field, to serve some of those roles. Having a little bit more success on the economic side in finding testifying experts that would be women in that role. But still struggling with the engineering side and to find people. But that is one thing that we've challenged our firms into finding, so that when the jury that you're going to select is likely going to be 50-50 men and women, right? That's usually what it boils down to most of the time. And when all they see is a bunch of men testifying, that it's just kind of weird looking, at this point. I mean, at this point, we expect to see just people from all sorts of different walks of life as your experts. You don't need to see the old official college professor looking person with the patches on the tweed blazer. So we've been looking for those types of testifying experts. So if anybody ever has any suggestions for ones, I'm always ears open for people who are good testifying experts that that happen to be more diverse than what we're currently seeing.
Yeah, I think that's great, in an area that I've never heard anyone comment on before in these types of diversity talks. So, our field is bigger than just sort of in-house counsel, outside counsel, government. We have more than that, and I think we can definitely put women up and make them successful in other areas as well. A question came in earlier in the chat when we were talking about origination credit. And I think it's a really good one, probably from someone who's in-house, because the question was, what is the most effective way to sort of start that conversation? You might not know what your outside counsel is even doing. So how do you sort of get that insight so that you can correct it if needed?
So a couple of things to do is probably get a little bit closer to your billing team. The reality is there's a lot of tools, certainly that I've been using at a couple of companies now. But there are different tools, so different companies use different things. But we have tools like Simple Legal and Counsel Go, and there's various ways that the legal operations teams in major companies have been working to streamline the billing process and the accruals process. And so going ahead and understanding who has been assigned to the matters, we sometimes actually, it's interesting, but we have lists of people that are assigned to the matters. And so sometimes you can get into a little bit of a back and forth when suddenly there's a new timekeeper on your matter that you didn't approve. That's a pet peeve of mine, actually. for people to just throw new timekeepers on without actually talking first about whether we're going to do that or not on a particular matter. But familiarizing yourself with how those bills go in. And I think most firms have some department that is pulling everybody's time cards together and doing the submissions. And so you're allowing there to be a layer between yourselves and understanding what is going into the system and how that is being presented in the system. But each one of our matters has who we designate as a lead counsel on the matter and who we designate as approved timekeepers on the matter, so that when the invoices come in, there's a team that checks and makes sure that these are all approved timekeepers, and they will reach out to us and say, hey, we're seeing a new timekeeper on this matter. Is that something you approved? Are you comfortable with it? Before we actually see the invoices. And this is all done in an effort to give the in-house counsel time back on otherwise administrative matters. So what I would say is don't get so far from the administration of it. And if you are ever lucky enough to have a partner ask you to help them with the billing, just run towards that opportunity. Do not treat it as administrative scuttlebutt work. They have given you the keys to the kingdom. Get involved in billing, because it is vitally important to your client that those bills come in correct, and you will get more insight into how this is being done than any other way.
Shawnna, do you have anything to add about sort of ways to approach these topics to firms? I know you've been approaching them recently with your new guidelines, but it sounds like you used maybe a blunt rule as opposed to a light touch, but
I mean, I have reached out to a few where I'm seeing, similar to what Amalie says, the billing problem, the origination problem, and I've offered to, meet with firm management. I've offered to meet with, however they're structured, to let them know that this is something that we don't like. And I think that that's the best way to approach it, especially, for anybody who is in-house and is wanting to try to make a change on this. Sometimes your go-to people at the firm need you to help be their voice, right? And to ask for maybe a dinner or a meeting with people who might have a say and just give the feedback. So one thing I did more recently was I asked for just a feedback call. We did a Zoom session, with one of the particular firms that I was working with. And I let them know that this is just, we're not liking seeing this. This is something that we're looking at. These are the people who are working on my matter. It's not the people who have been the relationship partner for years. Not that the relationship partners haven't been great, but that's not who's doing my work. Sometimes relationship partners come in and they're not even litigators, right? The relationship happened through a connection on an HR matter or, international trade matter. And that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So making that demand, making that request from an in-house counsel perspective can really help to move the ball. Because if the firms are hearing a lot of this coming from people, they'll make changes. Many of the firms have the ability to split origination. And I think maybe they all should start considering it a little bit more, especially if we're demanding it from an in-house side.
And from someone who's outside counsel, I can say your voices are heard much louder than voices, internally. So I just think repetitive requests for things like that, a lot of firms do have rigid rules of no splitting or, we've always done it this way, but that doesn't mean that you always should do it this way. And I think there's real opportunity there for you all to use your voices if you want to be the change you wish to see, as they say. So another question that I think might be of interest to our crowd is how can we as female IP attorneys sort of improve our pipeline and support diverse junior IP lawyers coming up?
Got to get more women in STEM, ladies. Start young, right? For any of you who were engineers or scientists, like I work as a mentor with SWE, the Society of Women Engineers. Just really encouraging that at a young age. I also do I volunteer locally with the Children's Science Center and do shows at particular schools where you make, GAC and make, just like little devices and model airplanes and engineering, science fair type stuff. Showing that science can be fun to women in particular is just key. So you can't change the pipeline at the end. Right, the pipeline has to start at the beginning. So getting kids interested in STEM has to start in basically kindergarten.
And I think it's also just maintaining and not chasing the talent that you have out. Because frankly, when I look at the associate ranks, it is pretty even in terms of males and females, and certainly in law school it's pretty even. And it's just the attrition seems to come as you move forward. And it's curious to me how this is happening. Obviously, firms want the pyramid, they want the leverage. That's what supports their compensation model. But I think there's a little bit of thoughts that the firm have to give about, if you want to keep a diverse team, you're going to have to keep more people and force less of that pyramid. And does this model that's been built serve everybody, or does it just serve the status quo?
There's no on-ramp back after motherhood. Sorry, like there's just not. And it's I think that's why Julie put me on this panel, because she knew I would be blunt, but it's very true. If you know, I mean, I have 3 small kids. Well, they're not small anymore. They were. When I was in a law firm, I had 3 small kids, and it's hard. It's hard to come back. It's hard to ramp back up onto cases. It's hard when you take your maternity leave, which you should absolutely take every bit of it and not feel guilty 1 second. It's hard to ramp back up into cases. And I think that ends up a lot of women they don't want to climb that ladder one more time after they had climbed it already. So I think that's just something that the firms in particular need to do a better job of. In-house, it's not as hard. You know, it's more understanding. It's just been easier for me. But in the firm, it was really hard to come back after maternity leave and then try to jump back into cases, jump back into litigation teams. And we just need to do better. We need to accept that is just part of the process, and people should come back in right where they left off. They shouldn't feel like they have to start over.
One thing that I've noticed, even since when I began my legal career till now, is just the increase in paternity leaves. That have, when I had my children, I don't think they were that common. Having a baby was still very much a woman's thing, and it didn't really affect a man's legal work. Amalie, have you seen that changing as well in your organization?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think when we were preparing for this came up in the context of, is it all doom and gloom, or what have we seen that's positive? And this is one of the core positives that I've seen, is that there has been tremendous progress. Maternity leave is much longer than it used to be. There is such a thing as paternity leave, and guys take it. And I can't, as annoying as it is in-house to have to figure out how to cover for the 3rd person's paternity leave, the reality is that is a joy, because it means that we no longer have mothers who take maternity leave. We have parents who take parental leave. And this is no longer a women's problem. This is a humanity problem. And that is all the difference in the world.
I saw a question come in. We just have a couple minutes left. What considerations do you give to trying to sort of hire counsel from smaller firms that, I guess, statistically speaking, they might be more likely to be diverse? Has that been something that's come on your radar, or anything that you've tried to accomplish or had any success with?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a challenge. I will just tell you, it's a challenge for the firms, because there's a sort of pendulum swing that goes back and forth here. So I would love, and I actually have onboarded small firms, women, minority-owned firms, and the challenge that happens is it takes so long for me to onboard a new firm. This is a special problem from my company, but it takes a good 4 to 6 months to onboard a new firm. There's no excuse for this in the entire world. It is a complete problem. We know it's a problem. But I think something that's happening in legal operations is a lot of ideas about consolidation of your business, that you have more say, especially if you're in a mid-tier company that doesn't have a ton of business, that you want to consolidate with a couple of firms to try to be able to negotiate good rates or something like that. And so there is a challenge. There is kind of these 2 diametrically opposing forces of, should we consolidate our spend with one firm and try to get better rates, or should we distribute it across multiple firms and maybe not really get the attention of anyone precisely, or is there a particular expertise that we need? But we do look for small firms and for value, and that's absolutely a focus.
I'm always interested in small firms. Absolutely. You know, it's just they tend to also have more flexibility in billing models, which is really something that we look for as well. So it's just finding the right case and the right niche and the right place to put them in. So absolutely, I think it's really important. Got one of my best federal circuit wins recently from a small firm. So
That's awesome.
Mhm.
All right, we got 2 minutes left. There's a big question that I'm having trouble scrolling to see, so I'm just going to go with the short question. And it is, does all of your in-house hiring attorneys pursue hiring diverse attorneys?
So at our company, we're particularly, Splunk is particularly well known for its diversity initiatives. And I feel really, really lucky to be part of a company that's like this, because it actually makes hiring diverse talent a lot easier. Once it's kind of like this goodness that keeps on growing. Once you get a reputation as being a good, diverse workplace, you attract more diverse talent, and your talent pool attraction just increases. We have this tremendous campaign in-house in our company, where every person that comes into Splunk, and whether they're the new CEO of the company or the CFO or whatever you are, we talk about our 1 million data points, that we are not just our job, we are everything that we bring to the table and all of the different points of our life. And that's just a wonderful cultural touch point, where we all understand that we are more than one-dimensional and that there's no person that's one-dimensional. But when you have that kind of culture, yes, everything that we're looking at is looking at the whole person and looking at who the best person is to fit into that team. And we just have the luxury of really having an amazing ability to attract diverse talent. And that just makes all the difference in the world.
That's great. I think we're about out of time. So I just want to use this opportunity to thank again, Shawnna, Amalie, and Sarita, who had to leave a little bit early, and really to everybody in the comments who participated, and I think made this discussion a lot more engaging. So thanks to everyone.
And thanks to Morgan Lewis for sponsoring this fantastic discussion. Julie, you did a great job facilitating this conversation. So thank you everybody for joining us, and come back on March 9th for our next accelerator. Have a great day.
Thank you.